Hill District neighborhood. Let me start over as we're now recording. I'd like to call the 11th meeting of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund Advisory Board to order. Always as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. Please mute yourself if you are not speaking. If you'd like to ask a question or give comment, please use the raise your hand function. We also ask that you turn on your camera so that your name appears when you speak. Also, again, always feel free to cover the camera on your device if you do not want to be seen on the screen. Also, just as a final reminder, if you have not returned your conflict of interest form, you are not permitted to participate in any motions or votes today. And this meeting does have a hard stop at 5 p.m. because a number of us have other meetings to get to. With that, Julia, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Is the representative of District 6 present?
Present.
Is the representative of the Hill CDC present?
Present.
Is the representative of the Hill District Federal Credit Union present?
Present.
Is the representative of the Hill District Consensus Group present?
Present.
Is the representative of the Wesley Center AME Zion Church present?
Present.
Is the representative of the Shenley Heights Community Development Program present?
I thought I saw her.
Yeah, Ms. George, Alicia.
Present.
Thank you. Is the representative of the Historic Hill Institute present?
Present.
Is the representative of Ujamaa Collective present? Is the representative of the Office of the State Representative Ariane Abney present? Is the representative of the Office of the County Executive Fitzgerald present?
Present.
Is the representative of the Office of the Mayor present? Is the representative of the Pittsburgh Public School District present? Is the representative of Allegheny County Council present? Thank you so much, everyone.
All right, thank you. That'll take us to agenda item number 3, which is old business. The next Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund Advisory Board meeting will be held on the week of May 15th with the target date and time of Thursday, May 18th at 3 p.m. May I please have a motion to direct the URA staff to schedule the next meeting of this board for the week of May 15th?
So moved.
Need a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Is there anyone that's opposed? All right, so the motion carries. So next we will move on to the reinvestment fund guidelines. Or may I go? Oh, sorry, I got myself out of line. So next up is the RFP admin update. URA staff, so you all are aware, is in the process of finalizing an RFP to hire an outside consultant to create, implement, and manage the program functions of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund. The proposed roles are 1, a resource navigator, 2, an application consultant, and then 3, a quality control inspector. URA staff will continue to work with the Greater Hill Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund Advisory Board as administrator of the fund. Are there any questions regarding that?
Is this a person who will be part of URA staff, or is this an independent person, Councilman?
It would be an independent person or persons. In the main
Consultancy.
or consultancy. And the main reason is much of what the advisory board has determined they want to utilize the money for are social service related in nature. And this URA staff are not set up to do social service related functions. Similar to the Housing Opportunity Fund that we house at the URA, the social service related portions of that fund, we outsource that work to someone else. So similar to this, staff can handle the administrative functions of the actual fund itself, but the social service related work we would need to, we're preparing an RFP to put out on the streets to hire someone to perform those roles.
So who would these persons or person or persons be accountable to?
The advisory board.
And how is it proposed that they would be held accountable? What criteria is it created?
There is, I need to go back and review the RFP that's being currently worked on. That was something I was supposed to have done by today, which I have not, but those metrics will be outlined there.
So is it possible for members of the board to have a copy of this RFP in its draft form?
Sure.
When can we expect to receive that?
I can send that over this week.
Okay. And what's the term for whoever, whatever entity or persons, what's their projected employment term?
I believe the length of the fund.
Okay. So if they don't meet expectations, how is that determined? And what would be the consequence? And also the other question, which is most important, is how is community feedback going to be handled?
I'm not sure what you mean by community feedback. You mean
Well,
the feedback of the advisory board?
No, I'm talking about these three positions. Okay, so right now, got a lot of feedback about the application, and but that's how we proceeded. So I'm expecting how this is going to go is going to be similar, and how are we supposed to navigate that?
I personally don't view this as something that we would provide to the general public to give input on. This is a function that is needed to employ the dollars, and this advisory board would need to select whom you want to work with to do that work.
I agree with what you're saying. Let me clarify. So let's suppose that this process gets implemented and there's feedback from the community because they don't understand it, they're having problems. That's what I'm really asking.
Oh, okay. That to me is a function of both the advisory board and the staff that we bring on to educate the community on how the process works. Staff that would be brought on would need to be able to sit with individuals if they had questions about how they apply for the funding. Part of what we had talked about in a number of other meetings was sort of the hand-holding function of, have you gone to various places to receive dollars? Because this advisory board has said we want these to sort of be, to the extent possible, last dollars in. And so the staff person that would be brought on would need to go through the process of sitting, helping those individuals, working through that process and educating them.
Okay, so that means that there has to be some type of communication that's initiated, sent out to the community, and then ongoing in terms of receiving communication from the community and feedback. So I'm just trying to walk through those steps because it doesn't appear that we have that listed anywhere.
Well, I don't think we're there yet. I don't believe we're in a position to articulate the community what exactly the process is, because we're still we're still defining that.
Agreed, but what I'm saying is we haven't even, so we're going to hire somebody and then we're going to wait. I mean, this is something that should be parallel path, I would think.
Okay. Are there
So
other?
it's just that we need to have this conversation so that people can understand and why and the how and so forth, because a lot of complaints that I'm getting is that nobody really understands what's going on.
Can I interject? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Rev.
So I guess my thought with the consultant or so forth would vet the various applications and then kind of process with this board, you know, a recommendation so that they're doing some of the hard background work. Is that correct?
I'm not sure. Say it again, Reverend. I'm not sure I fully understood.
I guess we're hiring a core of 1 or 3 persons who will do the vetting of the applications or the requests, and then tie into the board for to finalize the recommendation. Is that because really they have the capacity, or is that's what I just wanted that was my impression of that expertise, especially around social service. So that was my understanding. So I guess I thought we are running simultaneously together in that we're trying to get to the place where that once the applications are released and people start applying for the various grants or whatever, or that team or persons would do the hard work and bring the recommendations back to the board for final approval.
I'm not sure if we determine that final portion.
Gotcha.
The core function of the resource navigator is to actually assist people with getting their applications together. Someone's actually got to help them do that work. Whether or not that resource navigator then made a recommendation to us on whether or not we should fund it, I think is a separate discussion.
Okay.
And I think at the point where the resource navigator is assisting someone navigate all of what they have to navigate to submit, their job is to help them submit the fullest application possible. And I
Gotcha.
think that it's this advisory board that has to then determine whether or not you're funding that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Alicia?
Yes, my understanding of this, and you just kind of hit on it as well, Councilman, is that URA staff right now is just stage 1 with developing this RFP. Then that RFP will come back to us for final approval, correct?
Correct.
And then from there, this person's job is to receive and assist on the front end of every application coming through. And then those come to us, and then we make the decision. And then that decision is what gets recommended to URA. As I look at my notes here, that's where we last left this. And without trying to convolute it any further, in terms of application consultant line there that you have there, that is not for the advisory board, that's for the applicant, correct? Because for instance, we talked, okay, because we did speak about people who may need to know where to find an architect, or if they needed drawings, or how to get bids and things like that. And it was my understanding that that application consultant line that we have there is more so for the applicant to navigate the application or the full process, if you will, not to necessarily tell us who to accept, who not to accept, what pile they go into, correct?
So I
Yeah.
think the function you
Okay.
just talked about,
Thank you.
Alicia, is, let me just say, I think the functions you just talked about are more resource navigator, right? I don't, so that person would be, you know, providing recommendations across the board of what they know about in the ecosystem that can support, including other potential sources of funding that may be more appropriate. Whereas the application consultant is to, I believe, to both support applicants, but also to support us in reviewing applications. And then the quality control inspector is something that came up because they're, yes, the quality control inspector would be responsible for ensuring that the work was completed to standard if we provided funding, because the release of funding would have to be contingent upon certain metrics. So I think the one thing I'd like to clarify is we never did arrive at, nor have we gone into committee about the conversation that came up last meeting, which was how the committee is going to make decisions about applicants. We did talk about everybody, this being a community, and thus everybody knows everybody, knows everyone. And should we have a bit more of an arm's length review process for applicants, both for their comfort and also for ours as a review committee. And we didn't arrive at a decision about that as a committee. So I think that there's more discussion that has to happen about what we do once we have the applications. Who makes that final recommendation? Do we vote on it? Do we vote on recommendations? Do we review them ourselves? That's work that remains outstanding from my perspective.
Well, we haven't finalized that. You're right. And that's why I'm saying this is just a first step. Hannah, I see you put it in there. Yes, my notes coincide with everything you just put in there. Okay, thanks, Hannah. I see the chat.
No problem.
So the reason why I brought all this up is that everything that everyone said is fine, but there's nothing in writing to describe that. That's my point.
So we'll get the RFP out to the committee for review and open the comment period on that RFP so that we can incorporate additional language that any committee members feel is appropriate.
Okay, any further questions before we move on? If not, we can move on to item number 4, which is new business.
I do have a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand, Dr. Ellis. Go ahead.
Okay. So, especially since we're still under like old business, I don't know if this was addressed already, but it's related to my question. I don't know why the last meeting was canceled, and I would love to get an explanation for that. And then, is this RFP process going to now further delay our opening up of the application process for Hill residents?
So yes, it will further delay. But with that being said, we weren't prepared to release the applications anyway, per the conversations that you all just had, because there are too many unknowns. So yes, it's technically a delay, but it may not delay it any more than what was already in play. The prior meeting was canceled because we didn't have, there was no information to actually provide you with.
Okay. Okay. That sounds kind of odd to me. I'm just saying. Because what we settled on, we only had like kind of 1 or 2 outstanding questions, and that was related to the discrepancy between whether or not something comes in as an emergency, and how we would try to determine, try to make decisions in that capacity. So I thought, in my estimation, and maybe, if those who were on the actual, who did the work to actually finalize the application, if you want to say something, that's fine. But I thought that we were all on the same page with that. It was like 1 or 2 exceptions. And I was actually looking forward to the March meeting to resolve that and then to open up the applications.
Kim, if I may, you're right. We did not finalize that, and that would be part of next steps, because even with the consultant we're talking about hiring, that has to be made clear, and we have to have a process for that. And to my knowledge, there has been no further discussion on that. And that should be something we discuss and move quickly, because I was really kind of hoping we could get this application out this month.
Yeah, I was too. And I guess I just want to go on record and say, I definitely support the RFP process, and I should say I support having like the navigators and whatnot, but I really don't think that we should delay the application process any further. Some people don't need any assistance to do the application, especially the way that we very meticulously went through the application and made sure that the average person could apply. And then, let me see, there's something else I want, and then, I'm sure we'll get there. But since we're in this particular place, I can't help, but I would love for the applications that we do receive, that we receive like notice about them immediately. I could see there being some issues with the time that it might take the navigators to like sort through the application process, as opposed to us just finding out, who has applied. I think that that's important. And then relatedly, like I said, I know we're going to get to it. I'm not bringing this up to discuss it right now. I just have to bring it up right now because it makes a point. This letter from Salem's that we received to say, hey, we need help, we need money.
Can we do that in new business? I see
Right.
it on the agenda.
It is.
Right. We are. That's why I made the comment that I'm not trying to bring up the discussion about it now. I'm just making a singular point, which is that we received a letter to say, please support us. And you see that there's no navigator, there's no application, there's nothing. You see what I'm saying? And we know that they want assistance. And so similarly, I don't want for people who have filled out applications or, made requests or made emergency requests to be kind of delayed by the navigator. That's my point.
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult to release an application and not have a process in place and people in place to process them. If we do that, we run the risk of getting ourselves in a predicament that we're not expecting the outcome. So I think, this wasn't thought of as it should have in 2021 when the procedure that we're governing our advisory board was generated. There's no application and there's no process, all those things. So now here we are almost 2 years later figuring out. So I understand what you're saying and I agree with you. However, we need to do things in an orderly fashion so that we get it right the first time and we're not trying to correct missteps. So I think we should go with the RFP, get that out, and all those things that are necessary to support the application, and then release the application. Otherwise, we're going to have people wondering why their application is not processed, and we know right now we're not capable of processing applications because the infrastructure is not in place.
Simply for the sake of progress and being a little more productive, this is more for co-chairs. Would it be helpful at our last meeting, those of us on the application committee, we were joined by URA, they suggested a process for this, and we had some questions to that. Should we as a subcommittee again meet with the URA and then bring that back and move this along a little faster instead of us going back and forth and prolonging getting this application out? Because I think that some of the questions of the subcommittee were valid, and I think Julia did a good job of noting them, but we didn't come to any final conclusion. Would it be helpful, and this is more for our co-chairs, would it be helpful if the subcommittee met and put forth a recommendation for a process so that we nail that and get that out?
I think that would be helpful from my vantage point, Alicia. I would also recommend that the application committee review closely the RFP and make recommendations there, because that's ultimately what is going to determine our timeline. So yes, agree with you on the first point and ask that specific attention be given to the RFP. And I would ask for that to be turned around inside of 10 days so that we can get that released. And I'm going to recommend probably a 30-day open period for the public to respond to the RFP. Those are my recommendations, and I agree that we should proceed.
I think the RFP too should involve someone, the other committees, like I don't want that to just be the application committee, because we have others on this dealing with the money side and several other things that I think would be just as important, their input, just as important for the RFP. And this consultant we're hiring more so than maybe even some of us just trying to do the application. So I guess at this point, I'm gonna ask Kim, Arby, I see Lakeisha on. What do you guys think about us doing that and taking this part on so that we can move this forward and get this application out?
I think we could do that, but I want
Finalize the process is what I'm saying. Finalize the how from point A to point B, where this person would fit into the application review process.
Well, I think we can do that, but going back to Dr. Ellis's point, we should have had the meeting last month and we could have talked about this and had it done for this meeting. So now there's someone is saying that we should do this in 10 days. We got to get this right the first time, and that we didn't meet last month. All right, well, that happened and it wasn't what others wanted, but that's when we could have done this. Now we need to do this and do it properly the first time, and whatever time it takes, because we need to get it right the first time so we're not looking like we don't understand what we're doing. So I agree that we can do this, but we need to be proper and correct as we go about this business.
Point
Okay, so-
noted, point understood. I just, we've been through this with the application committee and we didn't quite agree with that because even I had some questions for the proposed process. I just want to move this forward so that we are not holding things up with old things. Let's move forward and get this application out. And I think we have the skills.
Agreed.
I think we have the skills to do it. And I'm asking that the same committee, maybe we join and put our brains together and nail this with the URA staff. Because if you recall, they had the PowerPoint and we needed some tweaking there. And maybe that's when we revisit that PowerPoint. But point totally understood. I understand what you're saying, Arby.
Yeah, I agree with Arby. I'm totally willing to do it. Just on general principle, I don't want to be confined to a 10-day turnaround period. It can even be sooner than that. But I think generally speaking, we should have had consideration for the last meeting. I just don't really understand that. But yeah, I can definitely help out.
And
All right,
honestly, with my schedule, I'd like it to be more sooner than later because I will be out of town a lot coming up.
All right, let's move forward. So thank you all for the commentary on this particular item. I'm going to ask URA staff to follow up with those members who were just named, and also to CC the broader committee for any participants or any committee members who are interested in participating. They can join into those discussions. And I do think that we need to have some kind of time-bound nature to the work. That can be discussed in committee. I would recommend, since 10 days feels like too much pressure to those who did speak up, I would recommend that by the next committee meeting, we be prepared to move forward, but you all can discuss that in committee. All righty, next agenda item. Thank you.
So, excuse me. So the next agenda item is the 2019 term sheet. We wanted to discuss the LRTA with you and sort of present what has been brought to the URA. But prior to specifically talking about the LRTA, we just wanted to give you all, again, sort of an overview of where we are. So we're going to briefly review the PARS obligations in the 2019 term sheet for the Block E and Block B. Just so you all know, to access the term sheet, you can do so on the URA's Laurel Hill webpage. So the 2019 term sheet between URA, SCA, and the option E for PAR to perform the following obligations for Block E. One obligation was to relocate the Rescue 2 EMS 14 station to Block E, include a 1,200 square foot space in the retail portion of the parking structure for the URA MWE Business Retail Incubator, and rent it to the URA for $1 a year for 29 years and support program costs, and then require any entertainment or music venue operator to coordinate with the New Granada Theater on programming. The developer's additional term sheet obligations are to help Partner for Work bring a first source center to help make sure jobs at that location can be filled by local workers, plus provide intro to the trades classes and training programs for building service and hospitality jobs. fill any funding gap on a current call project design and installation, and then renovate the Ammon Community Recreation Center, including a multi-purpose space, playground, basketball court, technology, STEM program for children, which in the city we call our Rec to Tech program. And then coming into the LRTA, capitalize 50% of the owner payment for the benefit of the Greater Hill District Reinvestment Fund as set forth in the Declaration of Restrictive Covenants dated September 10th, 2015, as recorded in the Allegheny County Department of Real Estate on December 7th, 2015 at D block volume 16218, excuse me, page 453, which is called the LRTA Declaration. So we have the Block E LRTA loan, and I'm gonna ask James Reed of the URA to give a presentation on the status of the Lower Hills developers' obligation for the upfront monetization of the LRTA proceeds associated with the Block E parking garage and music venue.
Thank you, Councilman. Good afternoon, advisory board members, as well as URA staff. I want to provide an update on the developer's efforts to capitalize the 50% portion of the owner payment that would be going to the benefit of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund. So the key things that I want to cover, first in this bullet point, the redeveloper has estimated that the owner payment for Block E will be $108,000 each year of the 10-year LRTA pay period. And 50% of that owner payment will be for the benefit of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund, or $402,000 in each year. Now, I want to stress that these are estimates, and things could change as the development unfolds and is reassessed, because the assessed value is really going to be a key variable in terms of what the actual amount ends up being. Now, based on these estimates, the development team approached several financial institutions about capitalizing the portion of the owner payment that benefits the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund. These financial institutions either declined or provided a term sheet for discussion purposes only. And what in the next couple of slides, I want to explore a little more with you all how to proceed with the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestments Fund's portion of owner payment from Block E. There are currently 3 options that we have identified. Now, folks on this call may have some others, and I'm welcome to those options as they are articulated. The first option would be to capitalize the Greater Hill District's Neighborhood Reinvestments Fund's portion of the owner payment and receive an upfront lump sum amount. Option 2 would be to delay capitalizing it. And then option 3 would be to take the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund's portion of the owner payment over time. And I'm going to go into each one of these options, and then we can have the floor open for some discussion. I think these slides might be out of order on accident. Is there? Let me see. I think I may have sent Gordon the wrong slides. I apologize for that. Let me
know what you'd like me to do, James. I have update 1 and update 2.
Yep.
Sorry. And then that's all I have.
Okay. Let me see. I think I'm gonna have to open up previous version. I apologize, everyone.
Okay. Yeah, if you can find the option 1, I think that's what we're looking for. Explanation.
Okay, I'm gonna have to read the option one. And unless there's I don't know if there's a way to switch screens, Gordon, without stopping the recording.
I can
May I
stop
make
my-
a suggestion?
I can stop my share.
Yeah, try that and then see if I can
It
share.
could still be recording.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
May I make a suggestion to help move us forward?
Yes,
Can you just email it to us and we will all have it and you won't have to worry about it being up on the screen. You can read it. That way, you know, everybody gets it pretty quickly and we can all see what you're talking about.
and here we go. It's
Nope,
on
looks
the-
like we got it.
should be on the screen right now. Okay. Thank you. So the first option would be to capitalize the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestments Fund portion of the owner payment and receive an upfront lump sum amount. And based on the term sheets that have been available, the loan amount would be up to 2.25 million. And the interest rate associated with this loan would be 12.5%. The term would be a 12-year term for repayment with 2 years of interest-only payments. Typically, this would align with the construction timeline for the garage and the venue and the music venue. And then, you know, at this interest rate, I estimate that the annual debt service would be $325,000. And then the total interest paid on the life of this loan would be 1.9 million. Now that's an estimate, and you know, these factors will change based on, you know, if we decide to move forward with the term sheet, subsequent discussions and you know, factors such as the interest rate and the credit worthiness of the redeveloper. So
James, can you please just take a moment and go off view here with your PowerPoint and put this option one with the other two so that we can keep them up? Just take a moment to do that. We'll be fine.
Gordon, can I send this slide to you and you can put it in the presentation?
I think I can do that.
Okay.
Do you want me to upload this page into the PowerPoint now, or do you want me to just jump to the next page and we do it after and then send it out? What would you like me to do?
Might be able to do it in real time. Just a
Okay.
second.
Yeah, just let me know when you send it. James, I think I got it.
You got it? Okay.
I think so, yeah. Did you send it to me?
Yep.
I got it. It's coming up. Can you all see this? Everybody see
Yes.
this? Okay, so this
Yes.
is the one you just went over, right, James?
That was the first slide. That was the intro slide. And here we go. Yes, this is option one. Go. Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
And
So,
so just a couple of pros and cons associated with this. Upfront cash on the pro side, upfront cash deposited into the reinvestment fund. And then there's less uncertainty regarding the amount that's available to the fund. And the cons are, this will be expensive due to closing costs and interest payments. And as I mentioned previously, an estimated annual debt service around 325,000 over the course of that period, and potential total interest paid at 1.9 million. We can go to the
James?
Yes, please.
1.9 million, can you clarify the term of that interest payment that you associated that interest payment with? What was the
Yeah.
length of time?
That's 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that would be over the full course of the 12-year term.
at 12%.
Yes. 12 and a half, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then option two would be to delay capitalizing. This is a potential option where, if so, we could explore having having a capitalization occur later on, as long as it's done, before construction on the projects is complete. You could potentially re-engage, and potentially at that point in time, the interest rate environment might be more favorable. And the pros, associated with it, once again, if it were to happen, you have upfront cash deposited into the fund. You'd have less uncertainty regarding the amount available to the fund, and potentially lower financing costs if interest rates decrease. The cons would be expensive due to closing costs and interest payments. And also, because we can't predict the future, financing costs could be higher if the interest rates were to increase. And then option three would be to take the fund's portion of the owner payment over time. The pros: no financing costs, and there'd be an annual payment, which could aid in the sustainability and longevity of the fund. The cons: it would be a 2 or 3 year delay before the owner payment is available to be deposited into the fund. And then there could be increased uncertainty about the actual amount of owner payment. It could be less than what is estimated, what is the current estimate. So with that, I want to pause and open floor for comments, discussion.
Ms. George?
Yes, James, I'm sorry, because I don't have anything written, I need some clarity here. Option one and option two basically have the same pros according to your presentation here, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when we are talking, I'm sorry.
But just a key thing with option two, we don't know what that upfront lump sum amount would be right now.
And that was going to be my next question, because we did have it in option one, but we didn't have it for option two, which was my next question. Okay.
Yeah, it would depend on financing conditions. So largely the same factors that are impacting option one right now. So the interest rate being the primary one.
So it appears to me that the capital cost of the project is fixed. The property tax rate is fixed. So I'm trying to understand how there's a difference between any of the options in that regard, because you had to use the same criteria to get the 800,000 or whatever you had in option one. And I honestly would really like, and I've had this question several times, and I guess we're going to have to vote on it. When you have a presentation, especially of something of this nature that has some complexity, should I say, that should be sent to us ahead of time so that we can look at it and have an understanding. It would help the meeting go much faster and be more productive. But in option one, you had a dollar amount, okay? So the tax rate and the cost of the project initially, as time goes on, because of appreciation, the cost of the project, the value is going to rise. And the tax rate, if it didn't rise, it's still going to result in a higher amount because of time over, and appreciation occurs over time. So there's not enough detail in these options for me to make an assessment because there's too many gaps in the information.
Can you be a little more specific? I don't think I'm understanding what
Well,
additional information you would like.
Just, all right, so let me clarify. You have a capital project that's being proposed, built, however you want to characterize it.
Mhm.
In option one, you assumed a value to come up with a property tax. And you said 40%, 50% goes to LERTA. So there are numbers associated with that value that you came up with. I don't see them. I would like to see them. That'd be helpful. Yes, go back to that. See all these numbers you have in here. So I understand the prime, and they're adding 450 basis points to a prime rate of 800 basis points. I understand that. Okay. I don't understand why the term is 12 years. Some of those things need to be delineated so that you can make a informed decision. I don't have enough information. You have a
So-
loan amount. Wait a minute. You
Mhm.
say you have a loan amount of up to 2.25 million. I don't know what that's based on. See,
So
those things.
that is, yeah, let me just interject really quickly to address those comments and questions. So
Before
these,
you go on, can you have those put in something that we can read so we can have it? So when I talk to other members of my RCO, that I can go through and say, this is that and this is that. I have nothing.
I can,
Okay.
yeah, we can certainly make this summary available to you all. There's a term sheet that's being discussed, and but it's not available at this point. So that's why I put together this summary that included the loan amount and the interest rate and the term. And the reason for the term is, the reason it's 12 years is because there's a 10-year abatement period where there will be an owner payment that's generated. And then the 2 years is included because there's going to be a construction period during that time. And so the estimate for the construction period is 2 years, and that's going to be 2 years until before the property is reassessed. It's completed and then reassessed, which then moves into the dollar amount of the estimate. So right now we're working on an estimated value of what the taxes are going to be or what the owner payment is going to be. At the end of the day, that when the property is reassessed, that's when we'll have firm numbers as to how much the owner payment is. And so what I'm trying to communicate is that there is some uncertainty between the estimate and what happens in the future. Now, these estimates could be spot on, but there could be some variability because, ultimately these properties will be reassessed by the assessor's office.
I understand. The problem I'm having is everything you're providing to me is verbal. I would like it written down. And there's a way that you can write things in such a way that you don't disclose things that are proprietary from the term sheet. it's very difficult to just use this because there's too many gaps. And you understand finance, you know, there's things that you didn't put here, and I'm aware of that. I would like this written down so I can see it, so that everyone can see it, and then they can have their questions about the things they understand and they don't understand, but there's too many gaps. And you're explaining it, that's fine. However, that's verbal. I would prefer it to be written so that I can refer back to it.
Okay, I have no problem with that.
If I could just chime in for everyone, the reason why we're bringing this to you today is the term sheet requires that the developer monetize the LRTA upfront. However, in trying to do this, they have gone to numerous financial institutions that have said, we're not going to do that for various reasons. They've eventually found one financial institution who said, okay, here's a proposal for what that would look like. Before the URA moved forward with accepting that or making that part of a board vote, we wanted you all to understand what it was because it affects your job. And so the real conversation in my mind is somewhat the most simplistic conversation is, do you think it's worth saying you agreed to monetize the money, we want you to do that? Or do you all think it's worth saying you don't need to prioritize because the loan that would be given to us is so unfavorable, we would rather take our money over the years? And I forget the numbers, so James, help me out.
Yes.
If you took the money over the years, what's the total value of that?
So the estimated value of that would be what, $4,020,000 over a 10-year period.
And the final number, if we said, nope, we want you to, you agreed to monetize would be?
Up to, you'd get a loan up to $2.25 million. Now, sorry to complicate it, but there would be closing costs associated with that. So the amount that would ultimately be deposited into the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund would be less than, you know, the amount of the loan that we take out. And at this point, I don't have an estimate on the closing costs.
Understood. So the question that I want to present before the advisory board, and you don't have to make a decision, but it's something to be thinking about actively, because you already will have to make a decision in the near future, is do you think it's worth receiving 4 million stretched out over the years, or is it worth receiving approximately 2 million upfront?
So I'd like to jump in just a little bit here, because I think the simplicity of the question is important for clarification, Councilman, in terms of what we're looking for, or what you're looking for and what the URA is looking for. But I also want to, there are a few things. One, I think it's important to note that the developer committed to making the capitalization upfront. So that's the first thing, right? That was their commitment. So it's their responsibility to figure out how they are going to make that without a inordinate burden that would have to be carried, from my vantage point, by the advisory fund. And so perhaps they should have considered this need for a loan before the interest rates spiked. Or maybe they should think about coming back to you to reconfigure the parking tax diversion amount that they are retaining, which is 75% out of the 100%, whereas the community is 25. Or maybe they should visit the retained amount of the LRTA that they are keeping in their development pro forma. But I think that the burden that the community would have to face, because they did not secure their funding to make good on the commitment to capitalize up front, is something that we also have to think about. So it's very clear that we need the resources now in our community, particularly because of the pressure that the Lower Hill development is going to bring with regard to market forces to the rest of the neighborhood. So we could capitalize it over time, but capitalizing over time will also tie the neighborhood's hands in terms of access to resources to offset the tremendous amount of market rate and gentrifying forces that are ultimately going to come with the destination development to scale of the Lower Hill. So those are some things that I think have to be discussed. And I think we need to get clear on how the URA will work with the committee to make the decision such that by the time the vote comes up, the committee is not, doesn't have its back against the wall or isn't in a difficult situation. Alicia and then Richard.
Thank you. For me, option one was the original term, correct? And now we are adding option 2 and 3. When we had our conversation, I think it was Richard and possibly Kim that provided a little more insight. The question was, are we going to focus on the wealth building and sustainability, or are we going to go with the uncertainty of the years ahead or stretching this out? Today, as we look at this, like I said, option 1 was actually the term that I had written down. Councilman, I hear what you're saying about they were unable to do that. That type of uncertainty gives me pause, but I want to make sure that with this, when we talked about this before, it's kind of like, are we going to go for wealth building sustainability, meaning that we would get this fund or these fundings and then basically be good stewards of it, meaning use these funds as we have them to invest and offer them up for other projects in the community that may bring more revenues to this fund. And I believe Richard had a little more on that. I see your hand up too, Richard. But I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the community benefit. I understand the developer is now unable to make that happen, but I don't want to lose sight of the community benefit in terms of wealth building and sustainability. And basically that would involve us being good stewards of this fund and making sure that when we invest properly.
Okay, all right, is it my turn now? Okay, so in my opinion, just on the bottom line presentation that the councilman presented, either 2 million as a loan and we would get that right away, or 4 million over time. So if that 4 million is over, let's say, I think you mentioned 10 years, that's $400,000 a year of steady income, in my estimation. And with that, that would give us an opportunity to sustain ourselves. It would also give us an opportunity in that time period to leverage. You could leverage $400,000. Let's say in year 3 or 4, then you have a significant project that you're attempting to do. I think it would be easier to go to a foundation or something like that and say, hey, we have $400,000. Could you match it so that we can accomplish this project? They would be more amenable to something like that. But when we start borrowing, or if there's fees and all those kinds of things attached just so that we can get the $2 million, I'm not so sure that that's sustainable. And if you know you're getting $400,000 over an extended period of time, you would be more cognizant of budgeting and managing it correctly and sustaining yourself. Because 10 years is a substantial amount of time for steady income of that kind, almost $500,000 a year. We could do a lot of things with that over time, as opposed to trying to do something immediately. That's just my opinion.
So
I
it
have my hand.
appears. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Barbie.
Okay, so I agree with Mr. Witherspoon and part of what he said. And I agree with Marimba and what she said around in regards to the capitalization. So one of the things that needs to be understood is that the developer said that they would capitalize. So the loan should not be penalized at any cost. It should be a net inflow and there should be no outflow going from the reinvestment fund to pay for a loan. That's not our business. Okay, that's what was supposed to happen. And however this transpired, if there is a loan, that's the developer's cost. Okay. So this is why I keep asking for things in writing so you can see this, because a lot of verbal makes me nervous. The point to make is that you're talking about whether or not you want money over time, which would not bear any interest. It would just be a lump sum payment of $400,000. So there's no interest associated with that, okay? Which would be simple interest instead of interest associated with a loan, because of way this is, the total interest paid would be around 1.9 million. That's not acceptable for anybody. So we need more information. It appears that we could accept this money at a later date. We don't know what that money looks like because there's no numbers in here. So if you wait 2 years for the construction and when they're issued the certificate of occupancy, excuse me, for the project, then they could provide the money at that point. We don't know what that looks like. So there's a lot of gaps. I understand what Mr. Lavelle was saying, and that's what I was getting to. But we don't have enough information, and we don't have time frames as to how long we have to make a choice or decision. All these things need to be presented in an orderly fashion in a document so that we can all read and be starting on the same page. It appears to me that the 400,000 per year would be beneficial if there's interest associated with that in year 2. So year 1, you get 400,000. Okay, year 2 is 400,000 plus interest. Year 3 is 400,000 plus interest. That's not there. So there's a lot of gaps. That's what I was saying. I wasn't trying to slow us down, but there's a lot of gaps in this presentation. Can't make an accurate assessment. But the gist of it, do you want to have a capitalized payment that results in a reduction in the total amount provided or not? That was clear to me at the outset. How to make that decision, there's not enough information. There's too many gaps, too much missing information. So to summarize, yes, we should make this consideration. We need additional information. We need a time frame in which we have to make this determination. And we need all this in writing so that we can discuss it accurately and be on the same page.
Is it my turn now?
Yes.
Dr.
All right.
Ellis,
All right.
I would actually prefer if you not speak on this subject, given that you're conflicted with your employer that is providing this.
Well, I mean, I think that I have like I have more to because of that reason, actually.
I understand, but I think it'll get a little messy. You're immediately conflicted. I don't think it's appropriate for this conversation.
Well, I disagree. I mean, it's just
Well, it is a discussion, so it's not like she's participating in the vote. I would think that if there was a conflict of interest, it would be around the vote. So the discussion, I think that she should be allowed to say what she wants to. And, you know, we're capable of understanding what's a conflict and not.
So, while noted, I do think it's important to highlight that oftentimes best practices relative to conflict of interest and recusal is to also abstain from discussion, precisely because of the conflict of interest. And that does not mean there's not value in comments that would be made, but I think it's I think it's a precedent that, because we will ultimately probably have to vote on this. And it sounds to me that that vote is imminent, based on what Councilman LaBelle said. And I think that it's important to respect the decorum and the precedent that would be the decorum that we're trying to follow, and then also any precedent that would be established, as we know that our work is going to face many conflicts in the future, given that it is a community fund and we are all from the same community. Thank you.
Yeah,
I think all the information that's available should be discussed in different perspectives. And whether or not that's going to influence someone's vote one way or the other, I don't think that's a conflict. However, to go back to what we said before, there was no meeting last month, and I'm sure this issue was available for discussion last month.
It was not.
So
With
it
all due
wasn't?
respect, RB, the conflict of interest issue is a legal matter. We can draw an opinion if we like from legal. And again, it's not about whether or not the conversation, the comments could add value. It's about decorum and the precedent that would be established. And so folks can email offline if they like, but with regard to this meeting, I think you've heard from both chairs now that neither of us think it's appropriate, given the direct conflict of interest on this topic.
Right, and neither one of you are lawyers, and neither one of you have cited anything specifically within the confidentiality agreement. So there's a lot of conflict there. So I'm not trying to be adversarial. However, I want to be fair.
Okay, we've heard you, we've noted it, and we are going to continue to hold our position. That is a conflict.
yeah. So thank you, chairs, for expressing your opinions. I just want to put on the record that Marimba Malayans has already expressed her opinion about the LRTA, and there is also a conflict with her. She's presently in negotiations with the Lower Hill development team around the New Granada Theater, which is requesting capital loans and funding and so on and so forth. And so if we were going to address conflicts of interest, we probably should have addressed that at the very beginning of the meeting, and Marimba probably should not have spoken either.
Noted. Thank you.
Good point, Kim.
And by the way, I'm not employed by the developer who's supposed to provide the LRTA.
But you're requesting them, and you are requesting things on behalf solely to the benefit of the Hill CDC and the New Granada Theater, and you didn't disclose that. You didn't disclose
That's
that.
disclosed in the public.
But
domain.
you're not disclosing it in this meeting where we're making decisions about the LRTA and where certain monies go. So what happens is that, given the negotiations, and this is just for everybody, given the negotiations, then Marimba and the Hill CDC, they can be okay with any possible millions of dollars that they receive. It hasn't been disclosed in this meeting, and yet the rest of the community with regard to the LRTA would then not necessarily be okay, or would be better off holding off over time, either choice. And I'm just saying that is a blatant conflict of interest. So if we're going to talk about conflicts of interest, let's lay everything on the line. And Marimba Malayans clearly has a conflict of interest here too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Noted,
So
Kim. While we disagree, we're going to keep moving forward. Thank you.
Well,
I'm gonna ask that.
May I
I'm
ask
gonna
a
ask that
question
we
of James?
not. Go ahead, Ms. George.
No, I'm sorry. I'm just really focusing on these options and trying to get to the bottom of this part so I can make an informed decision or get that's right. James, option 3. We are talking about putting these applications out now, but it specifically says a 2 to 3 year delay, meaning that funds that would be helpful as we're giving these monies out, this would not be coming in, correct? And has that been factored in into like a monetary value or anything like that? Because if we're saying, for instance, $400,000 every year, can we really afford to wait 2 to 3 years before the first 400,000 comes in? I'm sorry, I'm just really focused on this and trying to get these options a little clearer here to me.
Yeah, so I would say on that, we have currently, I don't have the exact dollar amount, but around $7 million that is currently in the reinvestment fund. Those dollars have not hit the street. And, based on the discussion earlier, there's going to be some time before we have the mechanisms in place to make sure that those dollars are getting out and into the community. And then the second thing, this board did work earlier this year and late last year to put together an allocation plan.
Yes.
Do not remember the exact amount of the allocation plan, but I believe for the first year we had talked about something around the $2 million mark for a maximum amount of money that would go out. And so, considering those sorts of factors, and if the allocation plan were to be, similarly situated for the subsequent years, then there would potentially be, continuing revenue and funds to put out on the street while we're waiting for the construction and reassessment process to happen. That's a simplistic statement, and there are other
That's exactly
factors.
what prompted my question, because it was proposed 2 million, and then we upped the allocations for housing and I believe investment. I don't have that right in front of me because that was meetings ago. And I'm concerned that 3 million that we said we would get out, how would that impact us waiting another 2 to 3 years? That's really my question. Something I still don't really have a clear answer to right now, but that's in the forefront of my mind, because these monies actually need to get out to the residents. And if we up that to $3 million based on allocations and caps for that first go round, I think it was rental assistance or somewhere in there, we added it. I'm concerned about waiting for monthlies and uncertainties that may be coming with that. So I just wanted to know if there was a dollar figure and the impact, possible impact, because I would consider that impact to be a con as well.
Mhm. I don't think there's a specific dollar amount of what would be necessarily lost is not the right word, but in having this 2-year delay, there would be, you're correct in that there would not be inflows from the LRTA
Right.
during that time period. So you would have to, work with the existing structure. So, that is something that would, quite frankly, have to be considered with the allocation plan for subsequent years. And I think.
Thanks, James.
Yep, and just to add, we still would run into considerations about longevity of the fund, even if we do have the upfront infusion. So, that would get us potentially another couple of years, but there's a trade-off there around, sort of the longevity and potentially, this being something that's considered a stable revenue or a steady revenue source.
Okay, so what is the pleasure of the committee with regard to decision-making relative to this particular topic? Obviously there's still some information that committee members have requested. There's probably some processing. There will probably be some follow-up questions. Is it the pleasure of the advisory board to have a separate discussion with Mr. Reed and other URA staff who may be able to support that dialogue? Or is it the pleasure of the committee to vote now or via email?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions of Councilman Lavelle, please, relative to this topic. Councilman Lavelle, can you please explain what the commercial feasibility clause is in the CSIP, the Community Collaboration and Implementation Plan?
Are you asking me to give you the legal definition of what commercially reasonable means?
Well, just how it plays out in the CSIP. And I should back up. The term sheet obligations and the LRTA are a literal part of the CSIP, correct?
No.
No. The term sheets are a legally binding URA document. They have nothing to do with the CSIP.
Okay. And with regard to the CSIP, some decisions need to be made that are commercially feasible. Is that correct?
Reasonable.
Within the CSIP, yes.
Right. I get it. I get that they're separate. Okay. Also, can you explain what the goal was for the Hill Growth Fund when we started as a result of my efforts and that of Representative Jake Wheatley, then Representative Jake Wheatley, about having longevity and us trying to stretch out the monies therein. Can you explain that?
Okay, so to put it as simply as possible, the idea was to create a revolving loan fund that would be able to support the community in various ways long into the future.
I'm sorry, which fund are you talking about, Councilman?
I'm assuming she's referring to the fund that's housed at Poise.
No, I specifically said the Hill Growth Fund out of that came out of the $3 million that Don Barton granted to the Historic Hill District.
Right, those are the dollars housed at Poise.
At Poise.
Right, and so how much money is at Poise right now?
I would have to ask Poise. I don't know.
I mean, the last I heard it was roughly about $1 million, right?
I honestly do not know the number.
Okay. Well, these are things that I think should be considered, you know, and since I can't discuss it, I just thought I would just ask you to elaborate on some of those things because this committee needs to know. This committee, you know, is based off of the Hill Growth Fund. Most of the people that are on this committee were on the Hill Growth Fund with a couple of additions. So everybody needs to really understand that history and understand some of the decisions that we made on that fund. Thanks.
Richard?
Sure. Yes. Well, first, James, I want to thank you for this presentation. High level, it's kind of high level, and it would be difficult to vote on something like this at this point. But if we're able to get some type of draft of a term sheet or something like that, that we can compare, especially when it comes to whether it's going to be a loan with fees and things like that, and interest and things like that attached, or how the $4 million over a period of time could be structured. And, when we look at longevity, which one would be more beneficial? Right off the top of my head, I think the $4 million over time would be more beneficial to the community than having a structured item where there are fees and the amount is cut because of interest and things like that. So if we could have more detail along those lines, that would help with the decision-making process, I think. And I think that, as I said earlier, that if we do have it cleaner over a period of time, it would be much easier and more feasible to try to leverage it to increase what's coming in. So there's more opportunity, I think, over a long period of time as opposed to short term. So
Thank you, Richard. RB?
Okay, so I have two things. The money that is currently in the reinvestment fund is housed at Zion Bank. Is that correct?
It was reported by the URA, unless the URA has changed their banking.
No, yeah, I was
Yes.
about to say, I think that's the name.
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
so is that in the interest-bearing account?
I do not know off the top of my head.
All right, so that money should be in the interest-bearing account, and we should get monthly reports on what's been paid to that account in regards to interest. We don't have that. So, and we also need time frame for this information, when we're going to receive it, and how long we have to understand it. And in regards to conflict of interest, we need to really be careful, because it seems to me that people are cherry picking. So the Hill CDC gets 4% of the LERTA money. So any discussion that the Hill CDC has on the LRTA money could be considered to be a conflict. So there's a lot of things, and we're cherry picking from one to the other that makes it convenient for one position to the other, and that needs to end. It's got to be fair, transparent across the board for everyone. So we need to understand that you can't cherry pick. In regards to the CSIP has what's in there, a tax investment fund, which is a bond fund. The city stopped the TIF after their situation with Lazarus, and in August of 2014, they went full LRTA. So that's how that transpired, and we need to be mindful of that. And I agree that we need to, we have too much verbal. We don't have enough things in writing as to how we do business. And it's subject to change based upon the recollection and whims of whoever's speaking at the time. That's not how you conduct business. That's not fair, equitable, and reasonable. So we have work to do, and I understand there's a desire to get this money out. In regards to leveraging, what Mr. Witherspoon is saying is that you take $400,000 and you put it in a fund. If it's just a simple bond fund, okay, you know, a 2-year bond or 6-month bond, things of that nature. So those things need to be in this information so that we can understand what the true pros and cons are, okay? Because 5% of 400,000 is $20,000. So if a bond's paying 5% in a 6-month period, you put 380,000 in the bond and you get 400,000 back after the end of 6 months. So that's leveraging. So those things need to be available so people can see. I agree with Alicia that we need to be expeditious, but we need to be smart. And right now, there's too much verbal and not enough written down so that we can all be on the same page and see exactly what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, RB. Are there any additional comments? And I do want to note that any appropriate disclosures that need to be made, I will ask the URA's legal department if they have been in receipt of those. It is well known that Hill CDC receives a percentage of the LRTA. Thank you for the reminder to the public, RB. We're happy to disclose that prior to comments in the future, should that be the desire of the committee, as well as a legal requirement or recommendation from the URA. With that said, given the time that we are looking at here, 4:30, Councilman Lavelle, do you want to proceed with the meeting?
Yeah, and I'd like to make a motion, please. My motion is that if anyone is employed by or in negotiations with a party for any of the issues that are brought up, that either they be excluded from the discussion or excluded from the vote or have to abstain from the vote, regardless of who they are, be they co-chairs or members.
I think that we can secure an opinion. I think before we get into arbitrary rules on how we want to carry out either parliamentarian actions and or procedures, I think it's important for us to have that dialogue. If the committee chooses, there's probably not sufficient context to that concern without doing a deeper dive dialogue. So, for example, Dr. Ellis, the Hill CDC is not in negotiations relative to the future LRTA payment. The Hill CDC is in discussions relative to coordinating programming on New Granada, which requires nothing from the LRTA payment per se, right? But it's if the public is not if that dialogue is not happening at this level, and if the committee is not able to get the appropriate information to make thoughtful decisions, then a thing may look like a thing that it's not. And so I'm just going to ask that before we hastily start voting on who can speak and who cannot speak, you have a direct conflict of interest on this matter because of your employer paying the LRTA. That is why there's such a clear concern. But your point is taken, and I would recommend that we as a committee, you know, have a more thoughtful dialogue around any rules that we'd like to implement relative to dialogue.
I think that, I think that with her motion, with Dr. Ellis's motion, that's a policy creation. And you can't create a policy without you know, having it in writing and parsing it and making sure that it's appropriate across the board. I mean, her point is great, but it should be more formalized instead of just a you know, a motion in a meeting, you know. So Dr. Ellis, I would suggest that you draft something and send it out to the committee for our consideration, and then we could potentially vote on it at our next meeting, because that's definitely a draft of a policy that in that motion you just made.
What I will do to move this conversation forward is go back and review our current policies, procedures, and see what they speak to as it relates to conflict of interest. And then we can present that information to this committee so that we're all clear and all on the same page.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was getting ready to say, is that we all sign conflicts of interest, you know, be on this committee. And I don't think that, I mean, first of all, the decision for me not to even discuss our options was just made on the fly, right? I mean, it wasn't a policy that was established.
Yeah,
I was
true.
definitely going to disclose my dual capacity role, but in my dual capacity role, it also means that I have, you know, more information, you know, to share with the committee. And I'm here as a representative of the Historic Hill Institute. And the irony is that I'm also here. I mean, we wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for my previous work. And the community, just for the record, the community did not vote on or necessarily approve that the Hill CDC get any payment from the LRTA. Now, maybe the community would have said yes, but the fact of the matter is the community was not given a choice. So when we talk about all of these things, it's just, it's random and it is arbitrary. So I don't mind writing up anything or anything like that, but I will first, you know, defer to our conflict of interest policy, period. But to say that somebody that's in negotiations is not a conflict of interest when the monies come from a certain pot, whether it's LRTA or not, that is obfuscation. And I'm just not gonna, you know, I mean, you all know me, like, I'm not gonna tolerate that, because I look out for the community as well. And so if I can't speak on it, then nobody that has a conflict of interest should be able to speak on it. I was not going to vote. I was actually going to abstain. And as you all notice, I remained silent. I wanted to be the last person to speak, precisely because I have the dual role. So I was trying to be respectful, and then, you know, was just shut down. I don't think that that's fair. And I do think it's arbitrary. So if we're going to be making these types of rules, that's why I put the motion on the table.
Thank you.
She is being consistent. You know,
Order
one
of the
side
day,
is
just for, in terms of time, can we call for order of the day? I mean, all good discussions, but it died for lack of a second in terms of a motion. Order of the day is that I think we want to look at the procedure of our, and so let's try to finish as much as the agenda as possible before 5 o'clock.
Thank you, Reverend Grayson. So we have a second item under new business, which is Salim's Market. You all should have received a notice that Abdullah sent to everyone. Salim's would like to be able to present to this committee and provide an update on the grocery store. And so we wanted to have a discussion with you all to determine whether or not you thought it was appropriate to have him present at our next meeting.
Do you think there would be any pushback from any other community group or those that have their eyes on the fund, saying that, you know, we're showing favorites or anything like that? Or
I
do we
could-
want
So,
to,
yeah, I was
do we
gonna
want to
jump
open
in.
it up?
I could certainly see a scenario whereby, because remember, these are recorded, these are provided for the public.
Yeah.
I can certainly see a scenario whereby if it were found out by developer A that Celine's was able to present to this committee, that they would then say, okay, then we would also like to present
Right.
our interest to this committee as well. I can certainly see that being a scenario.
And
It's
are
a
we equipped?
precedence.
Are we equipped and do we have capacity at this point to field all those inquiries?
I don't think so.
I don't
would
think so.
I would say no. If you're asking my sort of personal opinion, because the grocery store has been such a historic issue for our community, and such an even important one now, personally, it probably wouldn't bother me. But it would be setting a precedent.
Yeah, I think that we should inform him that once we open the door to inquiries and presentations, he'll be informed and that he would be allowed to present at that time.
I agree with that.
Yeah. As
I agree with
supportive
you.
as I am, I think a pre-request would be dangerous for us to touch.
Yes.
Because we'd have to now do that with every group. And also it could be a conflict for the application process. Everyone else will be required to present an application first, then it gets reviewed. Then possibly you answer more questions or you can present. But I think this is a little premature and too precedent setting to accept right now.
Okay.
Because I think we have to respect others who may come as well in the future.
Okay, I think I understand the will of the body. Just so you all are aware, I know I was out of town, so I wasn't able to attend, but I do know he presented recently at the Hill CDC's meeting. Myself and the mayor are actually working to hold a community meeting, so we'll probably present on the grocery store there as well. So we'll ensure there's ample opportunity for the community to understand what is happening with that development.
I think it's good to go with the RCOs and those groups. I'm just saying for this body that actually has to review applications and all of that. I would encourage them to continue out in the community presenting.
And I think it should be known that, you know, we understand wholeheartedly that a grocery store is needed. We definitely need that, but we have to follow procedure and protocol to get to that point. How we start out, how we go in is how we're going to end up, you know.
I think this just highlights the point that we keep saying we mutually agree on, but haven't been able to get there to the release of the applications. So, you know, let us commit ourselves to working as quickly as we can through the outstanding issues that came up today, so that applications can be formally opened and we don't have to worry about setting precedent outside of the protocols that are established and the procedures that are established within the published documents. Councilman?
And one last point is that if you all recall the last email that we received before this one, the amount that Salems is requesting, not necessarily from this body, but they said they have a funding gap of $1.6 million. So it's just something that we should keep in mind as we move forward and understand our responsibilities, you know, to our community and the homeowners in particular, and the renters in particular. We have a priority list and we have to follow those. The grocery store is very important, but we've been here before, and I'll talk about that the next time we meet.
Thank you. That exhausts our agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
Yeah, I
If-
would like to make a motion that when there is going to be a presentation by anyone to this board, that the presentation be in writing and be provided to the board members in advance so that we can see it and understand it, so that we can have a meeting that's more productive.
I'll second.
It was motioned and second. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, none in opposition. We will ensure that becomes part of our policy. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, thank you all for your time. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Okay, good day, y'all.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Okay.